My name is Oliver, I'm 37 years old and I live in Colorado. 6 years ago, I thought I had found a new direction in life, even if the road there was anything but smooth. Emma and I had been together for less than a year when she told me she was pregnant. That news hit us in the middle of a relationship already full of uncertainty and instability. At first, we were both overwhelmed. Like, what are we supposed to do now? I didn't know how to react. Just tried to stay calm while drowning in questions. But after a few sleepless nights, we decided to try and do the right thing. For the child, or more accurately for both children. Emma was pregnant with twins, a boy and a girl. I remember swallowing hard when I saw the first ultrasound. Not out of fear, but because of a rush of overwhelming and conflicting emotions. Joy, anxiety, responsibility, all tangled together. I had never imagined becoming a father at that point in my life, let alone the father of 2 kids at once. We tried living together, moved into a small apartment in Boulder, cut back on spending, split the chores, learned how to change diapers, warm bottles, and wake up every 3 hours through the night. Emma was a devoted mom, and I did my best to be the kind of dad who showed up when it mattered. But our relationship, it never truly clicked. We were opposites in nearly every way. She liked quiet. I thrived on energy. She needed control. I believed in flexibility. And so, the cracks that had always been there started to widen, one conversation, one day at a time. Despite our efforts, we couldn't patch what was broken. When the twins turned 2, Emma told me bluntly, "I can't keep living like this. We're holding each other back." I didn't argue. I had seen that look in her eyes for a while now, that exhaustion she couldn't hide. We split up without yelling or blame. Maybe deep down, we both knew this was inevitable. Thankfully, Emma wasn't the kind of person to turn nasty after a breakup. We came to a clear agreement: shared custody, no child support from either side, and a firm rule that personal issues stayed out of the kids' lives. Every week I'd pick up Jack and Ellie on Friday afternoons and have them until Tuesday night. Emma handled the rest. We only communicated when it was about the kids, and we respected each other's space. Just like that, 3 years passed. I focused on my freelance accounting work, picked up remote clients to give myself more flexibility. Every moment with Jack and Ellie I tried to soak it in. Their laughter during cartoons, those freezing early mornings driving them to school. Sometimes I thought, maybe I wasn't a great husband, but I might still be a good dad. As for Emma, she seemed to be doing fine too. Sometimes when I dropped off the kids, I'd notice a man sitting in her car, probably a new boyfriend. I didn't ask. I had no reason to get involved in her private life anymore. We had once shared a path. Now, we only shared a purpose, doing what's best for Jack and Ellie. I had thought things would stay that way. Steady, clear, uncomplicated. But then one day, Emma texted me, "We need to talk." Not about Jack and Ellie. Right then I had a feeling this was going to change everything. I met Emma on a Wednesday afternoon at a small cafe in Longmont. Quiet enough for a conversation, but not so private it felt tense. She arrived 10 minutes late, still beautiful, but visibly stressed. I noticed she no longer wore her old wedding ring, replaced now with a bracelet engraved with 3 names. "I got married," she said, right after ordering a peppermint tea. "It's been a year." I nodded, not surprised. I had guessed it from the times I'd seen that man with her. But what concerned me wasn't that she moved on. It was that this meeting had nothing to do with Jack and Ellie. "His name's Travis," she continued. "He's been divorced for 4 years, has a daughter, Zoe, same age as Jack and Ellie." I stayed quiet. Part of me felt a strange, low hum of jealousy, but not because of Emma. It was because I knew there would now be another man and another child in my kids' everyday life. I asked, "Do Jack and Ellie know?" "They do. And they really like Travis's," she said. "I just wanted things to settle before telling you." Settle? That word made me uneasy. "What do you mean by settle?" I asked. Emma looked out the window, then turned back to me with a sigh. "It means we just had a baby." A boy. I gave birth in March. I held in my reaction, didn't say anything for a few seconds, partly because I hadn't expected her to have more kids, mostly because I couldn't wrap my head around the idea that my children, Jack and Ellie, would now grow up with a baby brother that wasn't mine. But I swallowed all that down. I didn't have a say in her personal life anymore. "Congratulations," I said, my voice flat enough that even I noticed. "What's his name?" "Gabe." "Gabriel." I nodded. I thought that was it, that the surprises were done. But Emma wasn't finished. "We're also raising Travis's nephew. His parents died in a car accident last year. His name is Caleb. He's 11. I was stunned. Another kid? That meant there were now 5 people, adults and children, living in that house together. Jack and Ellie didn't just have their mom anymore. They had a stepdad, a baby brother, a stepsister the same age, and a distant cousin. "Oliver," Emma said gently, "I know it sounds like a lot, but I just want you to understand. Things have changed. My family isn't the same as before." I set my coffee cup down and tried to stay calm. "And what does any of that have to do with me?" Emma looked at me for a long moment before responding. "It does. I want you to understand that it's no longer just you, me, and the kids. Every decision you make now affects the group. They live together, grow up together, share everything. Do you understand what I mean?" I wasn't sure I did. Or maybe I just didn't want to. "So what, you're saying that if I buy toys for Jack and Ellie, I have to buy them for Caleb and Zoe too?" I asked, unable to hide the sarcasm in my voice. Emma didn't deny it. Instead, she said seriously, "Not necessarily, but I want you to consider it. Because to the kids, there's no such thing as bloodlines. They only see who gets what and who doesn't." I gave a dry laugh. "But I'm not Zoe's dad. I'm not Caleb's guardian. And I'm definitely not Gabe's godfather." "No, but you are Jack and Ellie's father," she said. "And they live in a household with 5 children. If there's favoritism, they'll notice it right away." At that moment, it clicked. This wasn't just an update on her new family dynamics. This was a heads up, or worse, a setup, for the demands to come. I stood up, pulled out my wallet and paid for both cups of coffee. Then I looked her straight in the eyes. "Thanks for the warning, I'll think about it. But Emma, I'm the father of my 2 kids. I'm not the bank for a family I didn't create." I turned and walked out, my chest heavy. I knew this was just the beginning. And my gut had never been wrong. That conversation seemed like it closed the chapter. But it was only the first door opening to a long, dragging battle that would unfold over the next few months. I felt myself being pulled back into a storm I thought I had already escaped. Emma didn't say anything more after that cafe meeting. But what came next was worse. It started small. One weekend, when I came to pick up Jack and Ellie, Zoe, Travis's daughter, was also standing outside, coat on and backpack ready. Emma came out, smiled faintly, and said as if it was no big deal, "Why don't you take all 3 to Eldora? I packed for them already." I froze. That trip had been a surprise I planned just for Jack and Ellie, a reward after midterms, a rare weekend for the 3 of us to bond. I had never said I was bringing anyone else. I looked at Zoe. She stared up at me with hopeful eyes, not knowing that the man in front of her was her friend's dad, not hers. I turned to Emma. She shrugged. "You said you wanted to create a family vibe. Well, this is the family now." I swallowed my frustration and whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "This isn't about the family vibe. This is about boundaries." Emma said nothing, just pressed her lips together. I couldn't bring myself to hurt Zoe's feelings, so I took all 3. But the whole trip I saw how my kids hesitated to share. Ellie didn't ask for her favorite ice cream flavor, afraid Zoe might not like it. Jack whispered, "Dad, do you love Zoe like you love us?" I didn't have an answer. I thought it was a one-time inconvenience. It wasn't. It became routine. Every time I texted to confirm weekend plans, Emma would ask, "What about Zoe? The baby can't go yet. but Caleb would really love to join. From 1, it became 2, then 3. Then came the gift situation. That Christmas, I got Jack a large Lego Technic set and Ellie the ukulele she'd been talking about for months. I brought the red and green wrapped gifts to Emma's house, like always. Before I could set them down, she asked, "Nothing for Zoe and Caleb?" I answered honestly, "I only bought for my kids." She didn't yell, but the look she gave me cut deeper than any words could. "So what do I tell Caleb when he sees Jack with a gift and he has nothing?" she asked. I replied coldly, "That's not my problem to explain." I thought that was clear, but just a few days later, I got a long-winded email from Travis. He said I was creating a divide among the kids, that they were starting to lose faith in fairness, that a real father— I wanted to explode. Love without limits? In their world, that meant paying without limits. Thought had been the PF. But it didn't stop there. A month later, the school organized a 3-day field trip to an ecological research center in Utah, a special program for 5th graders. The cost wasn't cheap, nearly $500, 0 cents per child. But Jack and Ellie were thrilled, their eyes lighting up when they brought the flyer home. I paid immediately to secure their spots. 3 days later, Emma called. "You already paid for Jack and Ellie's trip, right?" "Yes." "What about Zoe and Caleb?" Her voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it. I paused. "I'm only paying for my kids," she replied. "Oliver, they're growing up under the same roof. How am I supposed to explain to the other two why they're being left behind?" I gripped the phone tightly, palms sweaty. "That's not something you need to explain on my behalf. You and Travis are their parents. I'm only responsible for Jack and Ellie." "And what happens when the kids start drifting apart?" she asked. "You want your kids to grow up thinking blood siblings get priority and others don't matter?" I let out a bitter laugh. "It's not my fault you built a family and expect someone else to fund it." The call ended in suffocating silence. I knew, from that moment, the real battle had just begun. And this was only the opening shot. I knew there'd be backlash, but I didn't expect the storm to hit so fast and hard. Just 3 hours after the call with Emma, I got a text from her sister, a woman I'd barely ever spoken to. The message was so long I had to scroll 4 times to finish it. It began with, "Oliver, I don't mean to interfere, but as someone who was once a single mom, I understand," and ended with some bargain bin wisdom. "Be a man whose heart is bigger than his expense sheet." I didn't respond. The next day, Emma's mom called, her voice full of suggestion. "Oliver, the kids didn't choose the circumstances they were born into. Adults like us should see the bigger picture." I kept my tone polite but firm. "I understand that, but I'm raising my 2 biological children on my own, and I'm not asking anyone for help." She sighed. Emma's brother was once a stepson too, but his stepdad never treated him differently. "That's what real family is." I cut in. "I'm not Caleb's stepdad. I'm not anything to Zoe. I'm the father of Jack and Ellie. That's my focus." The call ended with a quiet but cold hang-up. I could picture her disappointed look, like I had shattered some fantasy her daughter's new life had been trying to build. With someone else's money. 2 days later, I posted a simple photo on Facebook. Just me and the kids baking cookies. All 3 of us grinning ear to ear. A few hours later, a comment appeared underneath, from an account named Jared McCall, Travis's younger brother. "Looks like fun. Hope no one's being left out in the happy blended family." I deleted the comment, blocked the account, and sat in silence beside the now cold oven. I knew they'd drag others into this. And they did. Messages poured in from all directions. Emma's old friends, former co-workers who met me once at Jack's birthday, even a neighbor who once babysat Ellie when she was sick. Everyone had a nugget of wisdom, a quote, or a passive-aggressive hint that I was causing invisible harm to innocent children. I didn't respond to any of them, but I started keeping records. Texts, calls, comments. Not because I was scared, because I needed evidence. The way they tried to pressure me, inch by inch, had the distinct smell of emotional manipulation wrapped in concern. One side flattered, "You're such a great dad. The other kids could really use a role model like you." The other side scolded, "No child deserves to feel like they're standing outside looking in." I started talking to a lawyer, not to sue, just to protect my boundaries. I didn't want Jack and Ellie to get pulled into a mess built by adults to serve their own emotional needs. My kids didn't need a perfect social media family. They needed clarity, stability, and a father who knew what was right. I called Emma back one late afternoon, when I knew the kids were asleep. "I'll be straight with you," I began. "I can't, and won't, play the father to children I didn't bring into this world. I can't fill every gap you and Travis can't or won't." Silence. Then Emma gave a short laugh. Not quite mocking, but not kind either. "Did you know Jack once asked me, 'Why does Dad buy presents for me but not for Zoe?'" I sighed. "I know." And I sat down with him and explained it the best way I could. That I love him. That I want to give him good things. But I can't be everyone's dad. "And what am I supposed to say to Zoe?" she asked, her voice suddenly softer, "when she sits there waiting for a birthday cake that never comes?" I closed my eyes. I pictured Zoe, a brown-haired girl with sad eyes, sitting quietly at a table. And even though my heart ached, I said, "Tell her the truth, that I'm not her father, and that doesn't mean she's not loved, but the love needs to come from the right place." This time, Emma didn't answer. The call slipped into a long silence and eventually ended without either of us hanging up. Just the sound of two people who once knew each other well, now standing on opposite ends of a battlefield, both loving children, but unable to love in the same way. And I knew. This battle wasn't over, but at least now I knew exactly where I stood. 3 days after that call with Emma, I received a short message. "Oliver, I want to meet in person. Travis will be there too. We need to talk, seriously." I read that line over and over in silence. There was nothing new about the way she always brought Travis into conversations that should have been between two adults who once shared a home, a life, and children. But I also understood. This wasn't a small disagreement anymore. They wanted a face-to-face confrontation. And I had nothing to hide from. We met at a diner in Lafayette. A neutral place, bright and calm, with soft yellow lights and brown leather booths trying to make tense conversations feel less sharp. I arrived 10 minutes early. They came together. Emma first, Travis behind her, still wearing his super stepdad hoodie and that ever-present, sporty watch. Emma sat down and put her phone aside. Travis didn't greet me. He just looked straight into my eyes like this was an interrogation and I was the one on trial. Emma started. "Oliver, this has gone on too long. I don't want the kids growing up feeling like they're treated differently. They need to feel equal, like one real family." I gave a faint smirk. "We're not one family. You know that." Travis raised an eyebrow. "We're all adults. We can choose to do better, not for ourselves, but for the kids." I looked at him. "Better? You mean me paying for every single thing the kids in your house come up with?" Travis leaned back, arms crossed. "Oliver, you're hurting the children because of your pride." "No," I cut in. "I'm protecting boundaries. I'm a father, not a bank. I take care of Jack and Ellie because they're my kids. The rest, Zoe, Caleb, Gabe, they're not my responsibility." Emma jumped in, her voice starting to shake. "Do you really think kids know who's biologically theirs? They sleep in the same room, eat at the same table, but then only two get to go on trips while the others stay behind. What do you expect me to say when Caleb asks, 'Why doesn't Mr. Oliver care about me?'" I took a deep breath. "Emma, if you and Travis want a blended family, you need to invest in that. You can't ask outsiders to patch holes in the quilt you chose to stitch together." Travis gripped the bill of his cap tightly. "You seem proud of your boundaries, but that's not responsibility, it's coldness." "My responsibility," I said firmly, "is to give my kids love, stability, and truth. And the truth is, they have a father. A father who shouldn't, who can't, who can't be turned into a wallet for a family he didn't create. Emma sighed, her eyes dropping. You don't get it. When the kids see their biological dad buying things and going on outings, while they get nothing, they'll feel like they're not worth as much. I answered slowly, looking right at her. No, they'll learn a bigger lesson. That some things in life belong to certain people, and that doesn't make anyone less valuable. Travis let out a short, bitter laugh. Do you realize how easily kids drift apart over small things? A movie ticket, a new coat, a weekend trip. The phone line on the table turned to mushroom. Then the two of you should figure out how to handle that with your resources, not by sending me the bill, I said, my voice finally losing its calm. The air around our table grew heavy. People at nearby booths glanced over. I didn't care. Emma turned her glass slowly in her hand. So, this is your final decision? This isn't the first time I've said it, I replied. And it will be the last. Travis leaned forward, voice low. We could have handled this with respect. But if you keep being this stubborn, don't be surprised when the kids start seeing you as the one who kept them apart. I laughed, short, bitter. I've been on the outside ever since you remarried and brought 3 more kids into the picture. But I've never been on the outside of Jack and Ellie's lives, and I won't let anyone make me feel guilty for doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. I stood up, placed a few crumpled bills on the table for the half-finished coffee. This isn't one big family. It's 2 families, and I've made it clear which one I belong to. I walked out of the diner, leaving behind the warm lighting and polite atmosphere that couldn't soften a battle this raw. As the early spring wind slipped into my jacket, I knew. I might be standing alone, but I wasn't wrong. I thought things would settle after that confrontation. I had made my stance clear. Sharp, direct, with no room for confusion. But I was naive to think that logic and boundaries could survive in a war built on emotions. 3 days later, I received a message from a name I'd nearly forgotten. Aunt Sheila, Emma's maternal aunt. The last time I saw her was at Ellie's preschool graduation, where she shook my hand and said, "Your daughter's lucky to have a dad like you." But this time, her message began with, "Oliver, not everyone is mature enough to understand that love doesn't require DNA." I frowned. The message continued. If you truly love your kids, you should want the other children around them to feel that love too. No one's asking you to be their father, but nothing's stopping you from being a decent adult. I didn't reply. Less than an hour later, I saw I'd been tagged in a public Facebook post by Emma's cousin, someone who lives all the way in Seattle and has never met Jack or Ellie. The post was dripping with morality, opening with, "Family isn't where you calculate. Sometimes a real man stands up for the vulnerable, even when they don't share his last name." Beneath it was a photo of 6 kids playing together in the yard. One of them was Ellie, smiling next to Caleb. The first comment? From Emma's mom. If only someone had understood that sooner. I read every line, every veiled jab, every carefully worded insult that all pointed in my direction, even if no one said my name. They were creating a new version of me online. Oliver, the selfish biological dad. Oliver, the man dividing a family. Oliver, the cold-hearted adult, in a world crying out for compassion. The messages kept coming, from people I didn't expect. An old high school friend of Emma's, a former co-worker, even a local sports coach who once taught Jack for a few sessions at the rec center. They all had the same tone. I'm not taking sides, but that "but" was the excuse to say whatever they wanted. But you're making the kids feel like they're not good enough. But maybe you don't realize you're planting seeds of hurt that'll grow later. But if it were me, I'd never let any child feel left out. I started muting social media notifications, blocked a few accounts. But what bothered me most wasn't the words. It was being cast as the villain in a story where I was simply trying to do the right thing. Me, the father who stayed up all night when Jack had a 103-degree fever. The one who practiced music with Ellie for a month so she'd feel confident on stage. The man who turned down a big contract just to attend their first-grade graduation. Now I was being painted as heartless, just because I wouldn't pay for kids I didn't follow. I talked about all this with Evan, my best friend since college. He stayed quiet the whole time I spoke. Then asked me directly, "Are you sure you've never unintentionally made Jack and Ellie feel guilty for having more than the others?" That question hit me hard. I remembered the time Ellie looked down and whispered, "Dad, can I share my birthday cake with Caleb? I don't want him to feel left out." I remembered when Jack asked me not to post photos from our museum trip online. Zoe didn't get to go, so I don't want to show off. I understood. Kids feel things deeply. But I also knew what children need is for adults to teach them how to face differences, not erase those differences through guilt or pressure. That night, I sat down with my two kids, not to defend myself, but to talk. For real. I told Ellie, "I love you because you're Ellie, not because you're part of any family, but because you are you." I told Jack, "Having a lot of friends and people around you is a good thing, but no one can replace your dad, and I can't replace your friends' dads either. What matters is that you know your worth, not how it compares to someone else's." They sat quietly, then nodded. I knew the world wouldn't stop judging me. But when I looked into my kids' eyes, I knew I was on the right path. And if that meant being the bad guy in someone else's story, just to be the right dad in my kid's story, then I'd gladly play that role. I decided not to let things stay vague anymore. No more conversations filled with hints, assumptions, or unspoken expectations. That Saturday night, after dropping Jack and Ellie off at their mom's, I called Emma. "I want to talk, one last time, clearly. No arguments, no blame. I just need you to listen." She was silent for a few seconds, then said, "Okay." I spoke calmly, but directly. "I'm not heartless. I don't hate or avoid Caleb, Zoe, or Gabe, but I also can't keep being pushed to become someone I didn't choose to be. I'm the father of Jack and Ellie. I'll care for them, love them, and support them with everything I have, but I'm not financially, emotionally, or mentally responsible for any other child." I heard her sigh on the other end. Not angry, not cold, just long, slow, like she was giving up. "So, you've made your decision," Emma said. "Not today. I've made it long ago. I'm just saying it for the last time now. And I hope you understand. This isn't about selfishness. It's about clarity. Something our kids need most." This time she didn't argue, didn't push back. Maybe she was tired too. After that call, like some strange magic, everything went quiet again. No more texts from Emma's relatives. No more moral preaching online. No one calling me heartless anymore. Even Travis stopped showing up at drop-offs like he used to. I don't know what Emma told them, but I figured she finally let me step back into my rightful role. Nothing more, nothing less. And in that quiet, I found something I hadn't even realized I'd lost. Real time with my kids. I started doing little things I'd only thought about when I had extra time, like drawing treasure maps through the woods behind the house, baking cookies using my grandma's recipe, pitching a tent in the living room just to read by flashlight. I bought Ellie a film camera and we captured awkward little moments together. The tree out front, my morning coffee mug, Jack's hands building Lego. Jack got into the keyboard, so each week we picked a new song to learn. Anything from movie themes to mellow jazz. And I realized something. Happiness doesn't need to be posted to matter. Those moments didn't need anyone's approval. Just the sound of two kids laughing was enough. One morning, while I drove Ellie to school, she leaned in close and whispered, "Dad, I know people say bad stuff about you, but I don't believe them." I turned, heart tightening. "Why do you say that?" "Zoe said you only love me and Jack, that you hate the others. But I know that's not true. We're your real kids. I think it's okay to love people, but it's right that you love us the most." I looked into her eyes, clear, unafraid. No anger, just a child who understood what adults spend years trying to explain. I placed a hand gently on her head and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. I love you and Jack with all my heart. And there's nothing wrong with that." From that moment on, I stopped second-guessing, stopped wondering if I was being too harsh, too stubborn, or too cold. Because I could see it clearly, the two children I was responsible for were growing up happy, strong, and secure in their father's love. Some nights, I'd sit alone in the quiet kitchen, sip a hot cup of tea, listen to the ticking clock, and think, maybe I'm not a perfect dad, but I'm the right dad, at the right time. And to me, that matters more than any label the world could try to give me. I thought after all the honest conversations, after setting clear boundaries, that things would finally stabilize. I was wrong. One Friday afternoon, just after picking up Jack and Ellie from school and prepping their favorite tacos, Emma texted, "Oliver, I need to talk. Call me when you can." I thought maybe something was up with the kids. Health, school, who knows. So I called back as soon as they went upstairs to change. Emma picked up almost instantly, her voice calmer than usual, which made me suspicious. She didn't beat around the bush. "Travis and I, we're thinking about moving." "Okay, so?" I replied, trying to stay neutral. "The apartment's getting too small for 6 people. The kids don't have their own rooms. Gabe sleeps with me, Caleb uses the living room to study, and Jack and Ellie, they don't really feel at home here." I frowned. Jack's never said anything. Neither has Ellie. "They don't say anything, because they're used to holding it in," she replied quickly, like it was a line she'd practice. "But your kids deserve a proper space at their mom's home too." I started feeling uneasy. "Emma, just tell me, what do you want?" She paused for a few seconds, then took a breath. "I think you should consider buying another house for the kids. Not for me, for Jack and Ellie, a stable, comfortable place, so they don't have to live between two worlds that are so unequal." I laughed. Couldn't believe what I had just heard. "You're saying I should buy you a house?" "No," she quickly corrected. "It's for the kids. I'd live in it, obviously, since I'm their mom, but the house would be for Jack and Ellie, to have a decent space on both sides." I walked out of the kitchen and onto the balcony. I didn't want the kids to overhear this conversation. "Emma," I said, "do you realize how absurd that sounds?" "No," she replied. "I don't think it's absurd. I think you're living in a spacious, stable home, with a playroom, a reading nook, even a home gym. Meanwhile, when the kids are with me, they're squeezed into an apartment barely big enough for a family of 3. Don't you think they feel that difference? And you think the solution is, I buy you another house?" "Not for me," she was losing patience. "For the kids. I don't want them coming back from your place just to compare and feel like life is unfair, like their own father created that gap." I let out a dry laugh. "Emma, the only unfair thing here is that you think you have the right to ask that of me. You and Travis are both adults. You both have jobs, earning power. You say the kids need a better living space? Then take care of it. Don't drag me into your plan to upgrade your household." "You still don't get it," she said, her voice trembling now. "This isn't about money. It's about Jack and Ellie feeling like they belong in both homes, not like guests dropping in a few days a week." I looked up at the sky and took a deep breath. Then I answered slowly, deliberately. "I already bought a house for my kids, where they live when they're with me. Where they stay with you, that's your choice. You and Travis are responsible for that, not me." "And what if they turn their backs on you someday, thinking you didn't care enough?" she pressed. I paused, then replied, my voice calm, strangely steady. "I don't buy love with real estate. I build love through time, presence, and care, every single day. And if they ever turn away because I didn't buy their mom a house, then maybe you should ask yourself who put that idea in their heads." Silence. Long enough that I thought she might have hung up. Then she said softly, "So you're saying no?" "Not saying no," I replied. "I'm setting a boundary, and this time, it's not moving." The call ended. I walked back into the kitchen. Jack had already laid out the taco plates. Ellie was folding napkins into frogs. They looked up and smiled, blissfully unaware of the battle that had just happened beyond those walls. I smiled back, because I knew they didn't need a second house to feel loved. 3 weeks after that final call with Emma, everything felt like it had clicked back into place. No more guilt-tripping texts. No more late-night calls with veiled demands. No more suggestions from across the blurry boundary of our past. Instead, there was quiet. Not because someone won, but because I had stopped playing a game I never agreed to sit down for. I still picked up Jack and Ellie on schedule. They still lit up when they saw me pull into the driveway. They still wrapped their arms around me during old cartoon movies. Still asked silly questions like, "Dad, if I vanished, would you come find me?" Then burst out laughing before I could pretend to answer in panic. I didn't try to make every moment perfect. I just made it real. And I believe truth, no matter how simple, has its own weight. One Saturday afternoon, while I was mowing the backyard, Ellie came running out in mismatched sandals, holding a notebook. "Daddy, I'm writing a journal," she beamed. I sat down on the porch, wiped my face with my sleeve. "What did you write?" I wrote, "Days when Dad didn't let anyone interrupt our time." I froze. Not because the words were too deep for an 8-year-old, but because they were so true, they hit me in the chest. "You like those days?" I asked. She nodded, then whispered, "Because that's when I know I'm the most important." That night, after they were asleep, I sat alone on the balcony, no lights, just the sound of crickets and a warm glow coming from the kitchen window. I thought about all the months before, when I tried to please everyone, bending over backward to be the generous dad, the reasonable ex, the socially responsible man. I had burned so much energy chasing someone else's definition of being good, where kindness meant unconditional sacrifice, and love was measured by how equally you gifted kids that didn't even belong to you. But no one ever told me, boundaries aren't cruelty. They are the act of loving with clarity. I used to think that saying no made me the divider, but I realized, no one keeps a family whole by becoming a resource for an emotional system they didn't build and can't control. I didn't need to play a background role in the story Emma and Travis were writing. I just needed to write mine, where I'm the father, the teacher, the friend, not perfect but always present, the man who lets his kids know they are loved in the clearest way possible. One time, Evan, my best friend, asked me over a cold beer, "Do you ever regret it? Like if you'd just given in a little, maybe things would have been smoother?" I laughed, no hesitation. Maybe smoother, but never righter. I don't resent Emma. Honestly, I believe she's just doing the best she can in the only way she knows how. She wants what's best for her kids, even if her approach sometimes misses the mark. But it's no longer my job to realign her compass. My job, now, is to protect the space Jack, Ellie, and I share. A space where they feel safe, heard, and never have to compete for love. I may not be as wealthy as Travis. I may not be Instagram fancy, but I know this much. When Jack and Ellie grow up, they'll remember the simple weekends. The way I took them apple picking behind the school, the smell of slightly burnt cookies, and the words I always said, "I can't be everyone's dad, but I'm your dad, completely." And that, no house, no gift, will ever feel like anything's missing. I set down my hot tea, looked up at the sky. There was wind. There was peace. And there was me, finally where I belong. My story isn't about who is right or wrong. It's about learning to protect healthy boundaries in a world that constantly demands self-sacrifice. I once tried to please everyone, until I realized that clarity and consistency are the greatest gifts I can give my children. No one can be the father of the world, but every father can be the strongest man in the small world of his child. And sometimes, that's more than enough. What do you think about Oliver's decision? Was he too harsh, or was this the right way to protect his family? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful real-life family stories to come.